So here's some of the materials I've made for the operating session. This train sheet here will help me keep track of who's running what train. Now I don't know what trains the Mans Creek ran, so I decided to divide up the jobs into some logical forms to keep people moving about the layout in different locations. I think this order will help kind of spread some of the load out, but still keep some need to have meets. Other things I made here is I made a locomotive cards. There's a card for every single locomotive on here. And what I did was I added just some what I thought were commonly used important F keys, just so people knew what they were. Headlights, bells, whistles, the brakes, the momentum mode, and then how to mute it, which might be the most important thing of all. On the back, I added all the full arrangement of different F keys if they really want to get more into it. But I think that it's nice just to keep the information limited on the front. There's also a few notes on here about how to go down the grade, like grade speeds up and down. Those are speed steps on the controller. And if you notice that the speed steps going down are a little higher than the speed steps going up, what I did is I calibrated the locomotive to have kind of a cutoff. I was using the Johnson bar feature to change it for going down, up and down the grade so that when you go down, it drops off the chuffing. But I really think that that's just something that people won't really do. So what I did is I recalibrated the chuffing, and so at about 55, the chuffing cuts off and it goes into idle. The other thing is that I've noticed that between 60 and 70 speed steps, which sounds like a lot, but on a shade, that's actually still really slow. But when you're between 60 and 70, the cars tend to have less of a buck going down grade. Now, my locomotives don't buck, but all those little minor slack areas in the couplers and the shanks and the wheels, what happens with the loaded coal cars is they will all come down the grade and kind of back onto the back of the locomotive, and they cause a momentary stop if you're at speeds of 50 or under. So what will happen is the cars will all bunch up behind the locomotive, come to a momentary stop, and then when they start to let out again, what really happens is you have a static friction coefficient there that's higher than a dynamic friction value. And then when you overcome that, all the cars then race back forward again. And it does this really quickly, so it gets really annoying. So if you can keep the speeds at about 60 or 70, those cars really don't have that chance to bunch up, and they go down the grade a lot more smoothly. Now, on the flip side of that, when you're coming up the grade, that speed step 55 is where the chuffs are really intense. And so I like to bring it up to 55 going up grade, so it's chuffing all the way up, and then going down grade, you just go up to 60 and all the chuffing cuts out. The other thing I did is I printed out these are train cards that match each job on here. So when I assign someone the train, I'll just hand them these car cards, or these train cards. So for example, you've got the Sewell log train, and it tells you what you should have in your train, where you're going to be running to, and just a quick summary of the job. So for me, that's all I really need for me to remember what I'm going to be doing. But for a new person, I do have the kind of the order of operations more detailed on here. So this is just a good reminder for those who might know the job. This is for people who want to know a little more detail, but hopefully that'll kind of keep people moving without me having to explain too much. The other thing you have to remember too is when you're doing operations like this with new people is they're taking time to read this. And it was one of the things I didn't realize when I had my first beta operating session with one person. Personally, I'm used to every train. I don't have to read the cards, and I don't have to know how the trains operate or how the cars have to be put together or what cars I need in the yard. So for me, I assemble the trains really quickly and I move them over the line really quickly. But what I found out with guests is that they're kind of thinking about it, and they're looking over the switches, and they're kind of planning their moves in their head because they're not 100% sure of the trackage arrangements and the locations and what would be the best, most efficient way to do that. they're also making mistakes where they remember, oh, I need to get on this other end, and so they're doing a lot more moves that I wouldn't do, and then they're reading through some of this stuff to see if they understand it, and they're looking around, kind of thinking of where they're going to go. All that stuff, adds on little teeny bits of time, and what I found is a job that took me 30 minutes is taking them a lot longer, more like 50 minutes. So that's why I think I'm going to need to add more operators than I originally thought I was going to. So today we're going to find out what it's going to be like to have really a Landisburg operator and a clifftop operator, and then a kind of a floating operator who's going to go between all those jobs, taking trains and keeping them moving across the line. Now, what will happen is everybody will be moving trains across the line. So I think it'll be really fun to see how all the tracks have to come into operation, and we'll see where things worked out as planned and where people found more creative ways to work with what I have here. Where's the superintendent? Logs to the mill now. Content.
Yeah.
Back up out of the...
It works slick. Where's your honk there?
It's that echo that sounds so good on these things.
I do too. Is it some of this resonating off your walls too? Just the sound file?
It's just what the sound file has.
Oh, I think they sound great. No more. That's pretty good. And then now I just go into my second car.
Yep.
You hear that sound? That was me turning the headlight on.
And the compressor comes out.
Mm-hmm. I did it with Mike too.